Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment, a podcast devoted to helping you overcome challenges in your life that prevent you from becoming the best version of yourself. Each episode features interviews with people from all walks of life about their journey of self-development and the principles they utilize to overcome their fears to achieve their desired outcome. Ready to be enlightened? Here's your host, Ken Primus.
Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment, guys. And you know that this is one of my favorite space right here because the individual is coming with a couple of things I deem very expensive. And I want to just thank them for coming and sharing it with us. First, time. 24 hours has been afforded every single human being on this planet. How you respect her, how you honor her will tell me much about you. Boy, did I dishonor time when I was young, but as I got older, I learned to fall in love with her. The other is the journey. The journey is a powerful creator. It has created Doc that is before us, and we want to get some information from him because through his journey, some stuff was deposited in him, and we want access to all of that. Those things that are wisdom, we call it wisdom, knowledge, insights, foresights, all of that stuff that is in there. We want to dance and have a robust conversation so that we can learn and become better human spirits while we're here on this beautiful rock called Earth. Doc, welcome to Threads of Enlightenment.
I'm so happy to be here. This is such a fun space. You've primed us up well. Let's explore life, and again, I'm so happy to be here and so curious to see where we're going to go in this conversation.
Definitely, likewise. One of the very first questions that I ask the individual that shows up, Doc, is I wanted to make my audience aware that their life is not just about themselves. It is about all of us. And that question is, how do you serve mankind?
Beautiful question. And when we look at the literature, I'm going to pull out my psychology hat here and researcher. When we look at, what are all the factors that lead to a flourishing life, there's a number of different models, but having deep, high quality connections and relationships is the one fundamental to a flourishing, well-lived life. So I love the question. And so for me, how am I here to serve? As a psychologist and coach, I have the privilege to open up relationships with people that are quite unique and special from their day-to-day relationships, a space where they get to share all of their traumas, all of their dreams, all of their fears, and in that relationship create a space where it's all allowed and we can all explore it and be open to it and embrace it and be curious to it, not run from it, not have to hide it. And I think my curiosity is one of the main ways I'm able to serve and to be supportive to people. And then on top of that, once that supportive relationship curiosity is built, then I think my strength as a coach is really challenging people to see what's their full potential. I love this quote by Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, that love, truly loving someone, seeing them with love, gives them the opportunity to see their potential and to actualize those potentialities. And so my role, how I serve, is supporting, connecting deeply with people, and then reminding them, holding high standards, expectations of what they can achieve in their life, both in this physical realm, but even more importantly, connecting deeply to that sense of self and, as you say, their own assignment.
Yeah, I love that. I tell people you cannot grow until you become vulnerable. This is one of the most strongest things that you will ever do in your life. It is not done from a place of weakness that society tries to tell you. Don't believe that lie. It is powerful. It is a place of strength, and you must go there in order to get your freedom, if you will. One of the first things that we do here at Threads of Enlightenment is jump into this time machine, and we have access to that time machine via the memory. And we want to go to some of those spaces that we hang out for a short time. We call those short times years. The first space that we hang out for a little while, we have a couple of folks that are in that space with us. We call them parents, mom and dad, however mom and dad are see the world through their trauma, because we know that they have been traumatized. There's not a man or woman that walked this planet that haven't been. And so they have learned how to manage the world through their trauma, and they are now going to deposit into you data. We call it, this is all the stuff, that programming that comes from the family, the type of food you eat, the way you speak, all the culture from your religion, all those beautiful programs that they begin to deposit. What was your family unit like?
I have two. Well, first, my parents grew up in Ontario, Canada, and I grew up in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. They're both entrepreneurs, and I have two older brothers. So, to give you a quick snapshot, my parents were working. I was at home, often running from my brothers, getting beaten up from my brothers. And so it was quite a violent household for me with my brothers and then their friends. As the youngest, as you can imagine, three boys.
Yeah.
And so that was a big part of my life, is developing toughness,
Mm-hmm.
but also all the trauma that comes with that. But my parents are a beautiful pair. They're separated now, but my father, his mother committed suicide. His brother has schizophrenia. He had three younger sisters. The youngest ended up living with us when I was born because she had no place to live. And my father grew a business, a restoration business, which I want to come back to, which fixes homes, apartments, you name it, after floods, fires, things of that nature. And he grew a massive business. To be honest, my dad's company is a great entrepreneurial story in Canada. I like to think that as a psychologist now, I help people restore their own self, which is kind of
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
So my dad was a rock, a solid rock. He employed any of my friends and family whenever they needed. So he was quite the provider, but he was working all the time, as
Mm-hmm.
you can imagine. Whereas my mom, she was an athlete. She's passionate, comes with emotional roller coaster. She also had her own challenges with addiction. And so my mom taught me flow state. She taught me how to ski. She taught me how to
Yeah.
pursue arts. So I had a nice balance there within my parents. But again, the main theme really from my childhood was this violence, needing to prove myself, which led to, by 16, being charged with assault 3 times, in and out of court, eventually sent to military school, a strict boot camp, because I was a high performing athlete, but also a totally out of control youth that was destined to probably end up in jail at some point. That is a little bit about my early programming.
Yeah. Wow, that's a powerful classroom, if you will, Donk. Here you have from your learning lessons from your brothers and the entrepreneurial spirit. I love that you're seeing this from the onset of your life, because mom and dad are both entrepreneurs. And I love the entrepreneurial spirit because they tend to skirt away from most of the programming that they have out there, with someone saying you have to go to school, get a job, get the wife, the white picket fence, and the 2 point something children, and the dog, and all that stuff. The entrepreneurial mindset is totally different. This guy and that woman has to learn how to control thoughts, how to manage that. And it's a whole different world. That's why I love talking about those special folks called entrepreneurs. Here you are, you have all of these things going on in your life. You mentioned a little that you got yourself a little in trouble as a young lad. And some of us, rambunctious little boys and whatever, we do some crazy things. And I've been there where we've had some challenges. So now, as you are in the system, you went to military school. Now, let's talk about military school, because here's this kid with all this excitement and energy going into military school, and there is another program that's going to go, boy, come here, let's talk to you a little while. Talk to
Oh
us
yeah.
as to how did you manage there, because again, there is much restriction there. There's a lot of, you can't act and behave a certain way, but you're accustomed to acting and behaving a certain way. How did that manage? How did
Yeah.
you manage that?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So when I went to military school, the first thing they do is they walk you into the gym, they shave your head, they strip you down naked, and you're facing a wall, and they come up to you, the professors really and staff, and they just belittle you, how you look, the attitude you came into, tattoos, scars you might have, whatever it might be. And the first month of military school is you're eating outside in the mosquitoes, can't sit down and eat until all 300 of the students are there. If anyone missteps, everyone's in the push-up position. You're doing 4 or 5 a.m.s. You're getting your bed thrown down the hall if your kit isn't perfectly laid out. So all these things, was a new world to me. But the reality was I had failed multiple classes leading up to this. This is grade 12 for me. One of my older brothers was sent there as he was expelled from school, and he ended up going to college. And I'm not a dummy. I wanted good for myself, and I needed the structure. As I said, my parents were entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
I didn't have much structure. And as someone who was undiagnosed with ADHD, I was living in a world of chaos. And we know that
Yeah.
flow state, getting into the zone, getting absorbed, which I did as a provincial high level gymnast, as an athlete in basketball and rugby, but I could never do it in academics because there's too many damn distractions. Girls,
Yeah.
other friends, drugs and alcohol, whatever it might be. And so in military school, I thrived. I
Yeah.
did very well. I ended up being it's called a corporal, platoon of 100 people that I would lead, and I developed and gained a lot of, I'll say, power and responsibility. And I ended up getting a scholarship. I won the Art Award. I was the captain of the basketball team after riding the bench because I was a super short kid throughout high school and with a big chip on my shoulder, I'll add. And so I thrived. But I want to add one thing is that while I did really well there, the challenge really became when I left military school, when that
Yeah.
structure, that discipline, and external reinforcement was no longer there. And then it was, okay, now you need to learn to manage yourself on your own. No more external reinforcement, discipline. Now that comes from within. So that was a little bit about my military school experience.
And how once you left, as you stated, now you're on your own. You are a different part of your life. You're a little more mature, if you will, and you're heading into the adult world, as they say. How did you land there? Since you've moved away from the structure, there's no support, if you will, but you and your thoughts. How did you handle your life?
Ken, my life all of our lives had many chapters, and I feel like my military life somewhat continued into college. My life really changed though, and I want to get to this is at the end of college. So I went straight into college after military school. I did okay, but then at the end of college, I had a heartbreak with my college sweetheart, and pain is a great motivator.
Oh, yeah.
And in that moment, Ken really didn't like who I was. I was a dishonest person. I wasn't the best partner I could have been. And I just would always look at myself in the mirror and be like, why? 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 And I remember as a child doing things I didn't like, asking, why, Brent? Why, Brent? Why, Brent? So I started just going to churches. I started reading different books. I think that started me on a path to try to find acceptance of myself. And
Mhm.
that led me all the way to India. And for me, there was a moment when I was living in a Buddhist monastery in India that I realized that part of myself I was trying to accept was just a story, was just a narrative, was just this language and ego that once I saw that and created some space between me as awareness, as spirit, however we want to call it, and that narrative, I felt like that journey to accept myself in some ways was somewhat over because I was trying to accept a part of myself that wasn't me. And that is what changed my life. That's when all that programming, all those rules and roles I had to play change, and I got to be flexible in how I lived my life differently. And that was really the most pivotal moment in my life, Ken, that led me to become a psychologist, led me to live a life more aligned with my values, not being programmed by so.
Yeah, it's a great awakening. And I always try to encourage people to get there, but to get there, you got to go through some pain. But when you get there, it's an opportunity for you to get some data, some additional stuff that you do not. And I try to explain this. Usually, and you give an example of when you began to enter into your trauma was due to a breakup. Trauma comes in many different states and ways and whatever. But when that happens, and I keep trying to tell people because we are such good actors, that is a part, that's a character that is going to die. A part of you, that character is going to die. It has been crushed, it's been broken, and that character is going to split. And you are looking at this character going, who are you? Not realizing that was just a character you were playing. The journey is now beginning, that you
Yes.
have to go then and go and find who you are. You played that character, that's not who you are. Now the journey begins. As you stated, it propelled you to India. How did that come about? I love these stories, the genesis of that. Where was it? Did you read something? Did someone walk by? Because I love how people say someone just happened to, or I just happened to. I don't believe none of that. I believe everything is orchestrated. It's just that we are walking in it when it is time. How did that come about?
Yeah, I was gifted a small book from my mom, a Wayne Dyer book. I think it was
Yeah.
called 7 or 10 Secrets to Inner Peace and Happiness. And in that book, there were a number of quotes by Rumi and Hafez and you name it that just lit me on fire.
Yeah.
I'd never been raised religious. I'd never really been introduced to any spiritual practices. And so that led me into reading Deepak Chopra. And then I went to a
Mm-hmm.
Deepak Chopra retreat. And then I ended up where you were, first to Thailand,
Yeah.
did a yoga training in Thailand, and then to India for 6 months. So it was a Wayne Dyer book, reading deep, rich poetry, really, and philosophy from Wayne Dyer on connecting to this deeper part of ourself that I had never thought about.
Yeah.
I never even considered that there was a part of myself beyond really the ego. And it was so inspiring to me. I knew that I wanted to be able to share with my clients as a personal trainer at that time more than just how to train their body, but to train their mind. And so I knew I needed to go to get some real experiential training, not just read books. So I said, let's go to India. Let's go jump right in.
I love it, man. That's why I always wanted to go back to those genesis of those stories because they're so rich with information as to your mind state at that time. And once you make that decision, I tell people this all the time that there's a couple of parts of you that are going to make decisions, and you have to learn which one. You got a couple of seconds. There is the natural mind that will make a decision, and then there is this internal being that sits there. And when he makes a decision, I believe, Doc, that when he makes that decision, that because he's coming from an energetic level, that he sends out words that will cause the matter and the energy from others to begin to bring to pass what he has just spoken, because that individual is a creator. And when he spoke, you said, I need data. I need insight. There's another part of me that I did not know existed. Now that I know, I'm going straight up the hill, as they say, to get all of the information to get there. So here you are. You took off. You took the challenge. You're in India now. You just got off the plane. And where are you going, man?
That first night I landed in Delhi, India, I remember walking on a street. It was late at night, past midnight, and the street, it looked like bombs had landed there. There was cows walking. I found myself in some random little hostel, and then straight away the next morning I went to a place called Rishikesh. This is where the Beatles went. This is considered
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
yoga capital of the world. The Ganges River flows through it. So I
Mm.
was dunking in the Ganges River. I was doing yoga classes. I was, embracing completely new culture. But really, I went to a few places, but really where I went was a place called McLeod Ganj in Dharamsala, India. This is where the Dalai Lama lives.
Yeah.
And I spent a few weeks in a place called Tushita Meditation Center. Anyone interested in really a true Tibetan Buddhist training, a retreat, Tushita Meditation Center. And I met a nun Robina Corton, a powerful Australian nun, who she said something very simple over and over again. You are the boss. She said, Buddha is simply a cognitive behavioral therapist that's saying you are in control of your thoughts. And she broke down Buddhism in such a simplicity that it made so much sense to us. Things like the way that you're thinking now is simply a pattern. It's a habit that you
Yep.
formed. You can change that. Second, you know, we have this potential to perfect the mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it's simply a pattern, we can perfect the mind, rid it of negative thoughts, fulfill it of positive thoughts, reach enlightenment. Very simple. She said things such as, every time a challenge shows up, we can transform that into the path of growth, so that when real challenges show up in life, we've primed the mind, prepared the mind to reach different states. She talked simply about the potential of the mind for perfection. All these things, again, I'd never, ever heard. And she talked about Buddhism in such a way that with such power and force and excitement
Yeah.
about the, like, just this aspirational potential we have. And I'll be honest, that led me into the field of psychology to do my doctorate in clinical psychology. But nothing I heard in clinical psychology was aspirational,
Yeah.
as motivating, as exciting to me, and also simple, basic, practical than Buddhist philosophy and practice.
Yeah, I tell people you can always go and get the theory of stuff, and you can get that from conventional educational system. They're full of those theories. But the practical stuff, you don't never get in there. The practical stuff has to come from somewhere else. And here you are in a situation where you are in the halls of wisdom, if you will. And she began to take that all of this information that one would think is very, very complex and began to bring it into a format by which you can now eat, digest, and live. And so some of those folks that are gifted like that is amazing. And I try to tell them about the individual. You have to understand who you are, Doc, and what you're made up of and stuff like that. Now, once you begin to go on that journey to find out who you are, then you get to study and understand human behavior as a thought. The thought fields, I tell people, and that thought field is ever fluid. It's a fluid thought field. It will come every minute, all over the place. But we get addicted, Doc, to some of those emotional things and that are there. Depression, all of those dark, low things. It's an emotional high some people get. And I tell them it's just like any drug. You have to know how to break that drug because your mind is addicted to it. And how you do that is by becoming a student of your thoughts, learning which is
Yes,
what is what, began
yes,
to break that habit, that emotional
yes.
habit that you're addicted to. And as you begin to do that, you will see a movement. Some people call that the subconscious mind. You go into the quantum field, and religion will say it is the heavenly places, all of these terminologies, but the same location. And the only way you can get up there, you have to go up in your essence. You can't bring nothing else up there. You can't bring your thoughts. You can't bring nothing but your pure essence because everything you need is right there. As you are understanding and you're learning about that, what began to happen to you
Mhm.
inside your being as you're standing there gaining all of that info?
Yeah. And I want to add, I love what you shared. I want to add that when it comes to managing depression, anxiety, whatever challenge we might be experiencing, as you said, it's about noticing. And it's about noticing when those initial thoughts or emotions arise
All
very
right.
early, before they take us over. It's about
Mm-hmm.
developing that meta awareness, that true consciousness, to catch it when it's small and early, and we can handle it. Because once that we're flowing down that river and fully
Yeah,
immersed in it, it's challenging. It
it's
is
challenge.
very,
Yeah.
very, very hard. So what started to happen to me, the core teaching in Buddhism is that life is suffering, and that is unavoidable. And the root of our suffering, what we add on to it is our attachment to ourself, and
Mm-hmm.
what Buddhism calls ego grasping, this grasping at a inherent part of ourselves that we want to protect, that we want to uplift, that we want to make feel better than other people, you name it. And so what Buddhist teaching is truly about is about crushing that attachment to the self, crushing that ego, so that we can, and I like your word vulnerable from earlier, so that we can be vulnerable to the present moment, vulnerable to surrender our defense mechanisms and choose growth, not security. Choose growth as far as adventure, purpose, love, self-transcendence, not seeking simply to feel safe and secure and build our self-esteem. Let go of those and choose deeper level needs so that we can reach our fuller actualization. And so that's what started to happen with me. I came home from India.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't wearing shoes for a while. And then I ended up in San Francisco and did a master's in sports psychology, doctorate in clinical psychology. And the whole time I was focused on understanding flow state, these
Yeah.
moments where we were fully absorbed into the moment, whether it was as an athlete, in work, in arts, where we're in the zone, and how meditation could help us get the best out of flow and protect against its potential lesser known dark side. I'll share more of why I studied this. As you know, I was a high level athlete, also an out of control youth. So I got a lot of flow in sports, also in street fighting, graffiti, other things. But I realized that flow was this massive power that when I was tapped into, I was the best version of myself, but it didn't always lead to a life well lived. It needed to be controlled. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's really what started to change. I got the experiential training, I had my initial trauma to get me there. And now I really want to understand the science, and particularly the neuroscience of what's happening in our brain when we're fully absorbed in the zone, in flow state. And that's become my life journey. That's what I spent 5 years studying. That's what I did my dissertation on, and that's what I talk really every day with my clients about, of how to unlock flow state, but also manage it through
Yeah.
mindfulness.
Yeah. Mindfulness, I try to tell people, mindfulness is that beautiful phrase that means being present. It's nothing like being present. That's where we have to live. I've been trying to bring people to that place. That's where we need and have to live. When we are in a mindful state, or when we're present, as you state, when the micro feeling of that, of depression and all those things begin to manifest, when you are present, you'll pick it up. But if you're outside of that, the wood is beyond what's on the other side. You have your past and all of the other stuff that hangs out there, your shame and depression and all the other things. Then what do you have on the other side? The other side of you, you have your future and fearfulness, anxiety, all those things that are sitting there. But we weren't promised. I lived the past already. So
Mm.
it's gone. I don't know anything about the future, Doc, but I do know I'm right here in this present. So what am I going to do right here? And you have to learn to take those thoughts. Meditation to me saved my life, man. It is the human being, and I tell everyone, the human being itself is a meditator. You are meditating on something. But when you become a purposeful meditator, one that is you recognizing the power of it and the tool that it is, your life changes, because you're now changing your mind. You're changing that thought feel that you were allowing to just run around. But I'm telling you guys, Doc is talking about the true stuff, the powerful stuff that will move you through from one state to another, and change your life forever, change your destiny forever. And Doc, I always invite my listeners on the podcast to learn to transition from listening to becoming a hearer. The subconscious being is the one that hears it, and when he hears it, it becomes reality. And so I want to invite you that are listening to us to transition. Begin to focus your thought on what Doc is saying. listen, and be free. Doc, here you are, you came back. You're putting in the study, all the necessary collection of data you're learning, and you understand the flow. You're seeing the inside of it because you're an athlete. And, when people are looking at an athlete, Michael Jordan and Woods and all these other guys, and when they're in the flow, they're actually not missing anything. And we look at that and marvel at it. But as you stated, that there's a dark side to it that you became familiar with. Talk to us a little about that dark side, because everyone is used to the other side. When they see the basketball, even when they are acting in it within themselves, they know that flow, they're familiar with it. But they don't, most of us are not acquainted. We are acquainted, but we're not aware. Let me put it that
Yeah.
way. We're not aware of the dark side. Bring us closer into that aspect of this particular yin and yang of the flow.
Love it. So let's start off with the quote I introduced my dissertation with, which was Plato's statement that the first and greatest victory is to conquer oneself. And in my dissertation, I talked about there's two ways we can conquer the self. One is in a flow state. So in flow, if we have the metaphor of a river flowing in front of us, in flow, we become fully absorbed into the river of our thoughts and our experience. We get fully engaged. We get lost in the experience, whether it's sports, whether it's driving a car, whether it's a deep conversation. We're fully there, fully immersed. And that is, when we transcend the self in that way. And interestingly enough, when we're in a flow state, the frontal cortex of our brain quiets down so that we can rely on well-learned structures of our brain where we've really learned our skill to just do their natural thing. So in flow state, we transcend the self by becoming fully absorbed in it, whereas in a mindful state, we learn to transcend the self and conquer it by sitting at the edge of the river, by seeing the thoughts, by seeing the experience, by seeing the self, but not being attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
So why there's a dark side of flow is because when we get in our experience and we lose a sense of self, we're not thinking about the long-term consequences of our behavior. We might be performing and feeling at our best, but we're not realizing how driving this car at 150 kilometers an hour through these streets could put myself at risk. We're not realizing how when I'm playing video games all day and night, how everything else in my life is falling apart, even though I'm having a great time. We're not realizing as a big wave surfer, when I'm taking on a bigger and bigger wave, which with more and more risks, it could be big wave surfing, it could be a professional overworking, you name it,
Yeah.
that while I feel so great in flow, again, I'm losing self-control. So the dark side of flow is how it can lead to a loss of self-control, whether it's going from huge highs to huge lows, whether it's addiction, whether it's losing awareness of the risks that we're putting to ourselves. But what really got me interested in this topic and is I read a book that talked about athletes getting into the zone and then falling completely apart in their personal life.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
having a personal philosophy to put those peak moments into the mundane of their life. Like, how do you go from a huge peak flow state, a mystical experience, to going and paying your taxes and cleaning your bedroom? And so that's where mindfulness and the ability to still feel that transcendent connection to a deeper reality, but one that's in control, seemed to be an appropriate antidote. And that was the word that my Buddhist nun would say, is that, Buddhist philosophy meditation is an antidote to the chaos in life. And that really is what flow is. It's order in consciousness, it's clarity. And we can seek that again through getting fully absorbed in what we're doing, but we can also experience it right here, as you said, in the moment, by letting go of our attachment to our thoughts and just being fully still. Hopefully that was a long answer. Hopefully that made some sense to everyone here.
Yeah, that made sense. And all of you guys that have been listening to our conversation, we're going to provide all of Doc's information so you have access to him, because it's really important that you learn about yourself, and you learn the tools that are out there to assist you to move through all of these things that we're talking about. We mentioned meditation. There's so many other ones, affirmation, engaging the imagination, all of those wonderful tools that you can utilize. And athletes do that. I was an athlete, and I remember, Doc, being in that flow when I broke the state championship one day. I was actually sick, and my coach comes up to me and he says, "Are you not gonna you gonna run the race?" And I was like, "No, I'm sick. I have a cold." He's like, "No, this is the best time to run." And I remember getting into that state, and the only thing that I was cognizant of was my breath, and just my breath, and feeling this elation, just excited. And I'm person, and I don't know what's going on in the outside, but I know how I feel the inside, and I'm in this race. And the next thing I know, I'm through the tape and stuff like that, but I was still in this state. And I remember being in that state, and how I was able to come out was when someone yelled, and the noise level pulled me out of it, and I realized that I'd broken the tape, broke the record. I had no idea. But like you said, how do you translate that from the track that I was on into my everyday life? Because my life was a shambles. I was a young man, living. I was having all kinds of problems, man. And how talk to us, bring us a little more in closer, put that microscope, if you will, so that we can get a deeper look into that aspect, because that is a powerful piece to make that transition. How do we maintain it? How do we get there on a daily basis? How do we learn? What tools do we bring with us so that we can stay there, if you will?
You bet. Love it. And I want to hear more of your athletic stories and more in the future. I'm super excited that we got to connect here, Ken, and I'm excited to keep the relationship going. So
Definitely.
when we think about flow state, again, being in the zone, being in the groove, being in the pocket, runner's high, whatever we want to call it, there's a number of specific triggers that get us into it. And sport is a great way to enter flow because it's what we could call like a high flow activity. It has a clear structure and boundary. Right when you step onto the field, it has all these flow triggers built into it. You have a clear goal, right? You know what
Mm-hmm.
you're working on, you know why you're there. Second, you have immediate and relevant feedback. You know how well you're doing. Fans are screaming, there's a sign, there's referees, whatever it might be. And then the third principle of flow, really what's considered the golden rule of flow, is this balance between your skill level and the challenge that you're taking on. Okay, so we enter flow when we take on big challenges like a race day when we're feeling sick, and when we have really high skill level. So when we're stretched, not snapped, but stretched beyond our normal limit in something we have a great sense of skill and competency of, that's again when we get fully absorbed and fully engaged in what we're doing, and we can unlock, ultimate human performance. The skill now is, how do we go from that state of doing, high level performance doing, to being able to be? And
Mm-hmm.
that's where I like to use the analogy of learning to live like a lion. When it's time to attack, you're attacking, whether it's in work, in training, in getting things done around the house, whatever it might be. And then how do you effectively transition to rest, to recover, to be with your pride so that you can do it again, right? There's interesting neuroscience behind oscillating between stress and recovery, but that's really the craft, is how do we rest and recover, find stillness and wholeness now in this moment, not feel like we always need to be on, rushing to one thing to the next, so that when we enter our high flow activity in sport and work and relationship training, whatever it might be, we come with a neurobiology that's primed for high performance. And when it comes to training how to do and be well, my path is now with my clients is very simple, Ken.
Mm-hmm.
As you said earlier, simplicity is wisdom. So as
Yeah.
we wrap up here, what I do with my clients, first we get clear on what is your personal philosophy? Who are you at your best? Let's get that down to a sentence, but really one word. Maybe it's truth for you. Maybe it's love for you. Maybe it's service, whatever it might be. And then all of my work with my clients is building tiny little habits that
Hmm.
bring that best self, that personal philosophy to life. And I'm talking about tiny habits, starting with always, how do they spend the first 10 seconds when they wake up in the morning? The training that I like to do with clients, what I call a morning mindset routine, is take one deep conscious breath. Think one good thought of gratitude. Set your intention for the day. As you get out of bed, feel your feet on the floor. Be present. It's called a psychological primer. And then get on with it. And it's about, again, doing these simple, tiny habits, but doing them consistently. That's
Yep.
what mastery is. Not making the path of growth so complicated that you never can fully accomplish it. So that's really my work. And it's getting people clear, have the self-awareness, then build these tiny little habits, starting from how they wake up to how they go to sleep. And the last thing I'll share, just because a lot of my work is in the workplace, I help people really do deep work where they eliminate distractions, eliminate disruptions. They have their goal really lined up for their work task, for their academic task, things so clear that they don't need to make any decision. They can just execute, like you running that race. And so that's where I, have this balance between doing and being. The doing is deep work, executing, performing at their best, being as productive as possible, and then teaching them how to, okay, now let's learn to be really still. Let's learn to embrace feeling a sense of wholeness and completeness, not based on achievement, but just connecting to that deeper self. So I love my work. I love being able
Yeah.
to straddle both of those ways. And yeah, it's been a pleasure to share it with you, Ken. And I'd love to have round two where we
Oh,
can
yeah, man.
where we can really maybe even go deeper into self-compassion.
Yeah, I
Because
definitely will.
because when it comes to human well-being, we can achieve and do all the things we set out to be, but if we don't learn to be kind and compassionate and speak to ourselves well and soothe ourselves on our own, we'll never fully arrive at what we seek in life. As Gandhi said, as the means, so the ends. So I love
Yeah.
exploring with people how to approach mastery in a way that's through means of love and care for themselves, not through just beating themselves up. And I'm glad I was able to share that last message before we have to wrap here. And Ken, so again, thank you so much for having me on.
It's an honor, man. And I'm gonna get in touch with Anne and we're gonna see what you could do in the second round. Guys who have been listening, I'm gonna provide everything for you guys to get access to Doc. It's imperative that you do if you want to change your life. If you don't like where you're at, get with it, as he says. So thank you so much, Doc, for coming to Threads of Enlightenment. Looking forward for our next thing.
My pleasure, Ken. Thank you. And thank you to all the audience. Look forward to staying connected, and may you be happy, healthy, and well.
Same, likewise.
Thanks for tuning in to Threads of Enlightenment with Ken Primus. Hopefully you're now feeling more empowered to overcome the challenges in your life, whatever they may be. Share that inspiration with others by telling them about this podcast, rating it, and of course, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For more connection, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Threads of Enlightenment. Until next time, stay enlightened.